Dr. Ron, this is Mariah, and I decided for my final presentation to do a short video on what I learned in South Korea in relation to the cultural dimensions that we learned in class. So the first cultural dimension that we learned about was power distance. And this really plays a huge role in South Korean culture. I never really understood what it was like to really be from a culture that had a large power distance. But when I was over there, I really saw it come into play even in small ways. For example, when like an elderly person comes into the room, or even if someone's just a year older than you have to greet them in a specific way, and you have to do a really long bow. Like I was doing short bow, and I actually I didn't get reprimanded, but nicely told that I need to completely bow down from the waist down, which was really interesting to me. And another way that it plays into was when we got onto the subway, my husband was sick, and so he went to go sit down, and everybody was like, no, no, don't sit down. And apparently there's a huge section of seating that's reserved just for the elderly. So it's just really rude if you sit down in that seating even accidentally. Another way that I really noticed it was when I was back here on the plane ride over, kind of reflecting about what I was going to say. I noticed they don't really talk about the government a whole lot. There's not a lot of, when we were talking with them about what is it like to live over there, and just culturally, how are things different, what's their life like. They didn't talk about, oh, I agree with this choice the government made, or the government's doing this, we're in the US. It's just, I was even talking about it with them. I was asking them what they thought about, what was South Korea saying in regards to Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, and just what do they think about this, and they really just didn't have a whole bunch to say. Like, it just was almost like their life and the government was completely separated, and that's really foreign to me. And I didn't really notice it until I was back here in the States, how much I was almost trying to ask them those questions, and they just were like, whatever, the government's the government. And the second dimension that we talked about in class was individualism versus collectivism, or individualism, sorry, versus collectivism. And I just had no idea what a collectivistic culture is like. No clue. When I got over there, boy, did I learn. Whenever I travel, this is just an example. Whenever I travel, I usually travel really lightly, and I'm just used to, if I'm cold, I'll just go buy a jacket. If I'm sick, I'll just go pick this up. It's no big deal. If I need to take a taxi after the day is done to go grab something, it's just not generally, that's just how I've generally traveled. Even when I travel in the United States, I don't usually pack a lot. Well, that was a huge mistake because they do everything as a group. If I tried, for example, it ended up being extremely cold and nobody had packed for it. So I wanted to go buy a sweater. And it was like a huge thing because all 20 people had to come with me to go get a sweater. And they planned everything in such large groups. We did everything with the Koreans. Like, we ate every meal with them. We literally traveled as a huge pea pod. And so to just go off and go grab a sweater, or go off and do this, or do anything really by yourself, was just really not allowed. And I mean, we this summer went with 80 people to Israel, and so we were in a group, but we were kind of still a person. Like, we could still go off and go get some cough drops, or if we broke away to go do this, it was no big deal as long as we were back here by this time. But that type of concept and thinking just wasn't there. We just couldn't. Why are you going by yourself and going to do this? Like, we do it together. So that was something that was really weird because I'm just used to going as a person. If I want to go get a bottle of water, just go get a bottle of water. I'm not used to thinking, oh, well, there's going to be 20 people, 20 Koreans behind me coming with me to go get a bottle of water. So that was just really, really strange. And then also, just every single part of our time over there was with a group. And even when I've traveled with groups, there's still been time when you're by yourself, or just sometimes you'll go eat a snack by yourself, but that never happened. So that was just crazy to me. And I love America so much. I loved Korean culture. They were so sweet, but it was a lot of pressure. I just felt so much pressure to always think about the group and always be together for the group. I'm just not used to that. So the third dimension was just masculine versus feminine, and that was really interesting to see because as I talk about other dimensions, it was interesting to see that they were feminine. And they really were. Like, they were very caring, very concerned. My husband and I both got really, really sick over there. I mean, we had like 103-degree fevers. We were just out. We were so sick. And we were sick for a number of days. I just lost track of all time. And they were just always so concerned about us. And if they were always like, how are you feeling? And they just wanted to make sure we were emotionally okay. And it did get really exhausting because if I wasn't smiling constantly, they thought something was wrong. And if I wasn't constantly like happy and excited, I could never be tired because it would make them so concerned. Oh, we're doing something wrong. Oh, she's not okay. Oh, she's offended. Oh, she's this. And so it was constantly just making sure that I was constantly smiling so that way they weren't worried about me. And another thing that I feel like played into this dimension of culture is they're also very quiet people. I'm very outgoing sometimes, and I can be very loud and happy, and so it was just very different when we were on the subway. There was no talking, just quiet. When we got off the airplane, my ears were really muffled, and so I was really talking really loudly, and everybody was like peeking at me, and I was actually freaking them out, and I guess that was considered really rude for me to talk loudly. So I just feel like that also plays into this dimension a little bit because they're very gentle and quiet and calm, and they kept saying words like, oh, harmony and peace, and just words verbiage that we don't usually use here. They use a lot of different words than we do, like a lot more feminine words, which I thought was interesting too. The fourth dimension was uncertainty avoidance, and I really noticed this in their dealings with their kids. Their kids, like in high school, they just work. Like in high school, their kids go to school from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night, and then sometimes they have after-school things. It's called like academic school or something, and they go to like taekwondo, or they'll go to piano lessons or different lessons. And so sometimes they're in school till 12 o'clock, and then they come home and they do homework sometimes. Most of the time they try to get their homework done in school, but sometimes they'll get off school and then they still have homework, and then they have to be back at school at 7 or 8 in the morning. And so their kids have a set path. Like their kids, it's very taboo to have piercings or dye your hair blonde or do anything outside of the norm. Like you are on this set path until you're 18 and you get into college. And then once you get into college, things are a little bit looser, and college is actually really easy for them. So it's opposite of them here in America. But they have really strict, like they're just on a very tight leash, like with how they dress, how they act. Everything has to be in this set way. And it seems like they're all very structured in some sense, which I thought was interesting with the feminine dimension, because if they're sick, they still go to work. Like our missionary was saying that she's from South Korea, and she was saying that one of her friends was literally to the point where she should be hospitalized, but she wasn't going to go to the hospital because she had to go to work. And so she went to work, and she was about passing out. And so even though they're very caring, there's still, it goes kind of back to, I feel like, the collective dimension or the group dimension, where even if you're still sick, you still need to perform. And so I really don't know how that is balanced for them within if you're in the group. But as far as when we were outside of the group, they didn't really put that pressure as far as, I think they understood we didn't know the rules as much. So they were more understanding towards us and gave us, I guess, a lot more grace. But within that culture, they have a lot of set rules that they must follow. Like when an older person walks in, you better stand up and bow. You have to, like, when I sat down, I had my leg a little bit open, so my legs weren't perfectly together. And the missionary immediately, like, tapped me on the leg and was like, put your legs together. That's very, very rude. Like, that's not allowed. And it was just a little bit. So there's very, very set rules. The fifth dimension is the long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. And we in the U.S. are a lot more short-term oriented, but it's very apparent they're long-term oriented. Like, they have no leisure time. I mean, we got up at 4, granted we were sick too, so this was really wearing. We got up at 4 in the morning to go to the church for early morning prayer. We worked with probably 2 different ministry organizations, then have lunch, and we had lunch with the group. So all the Koreans would come for lunch, and our lunch would be like 2 hours of interacting, talking, and just encouraging them. And then we would